more on the issues rather than the individuals that were exposed by the Radia tapes. I think I will throw the floor open first to Anirudh to say what he wants to on this huge issue. The fourth panelist is on his way, is trying to call me, I don't know why. Sandesh Prabhudesai is the editor of Prudent Media channel, TV channel, local TV news channel, Goa. So I will throw the floor open first to, I'll give 5 minutes each to all of you. So, and I think we'll give more time to the audience to throw questions here to ask. So, Anirudh.
Good afternoon, everybody. I know we all feel a little lazy after lunch, and immediately coming on this rather serious meeting is a little sort of
We'll wake up.
So all of you, I guess, have been following the Radia tape controversy, and it first broke in little bits and pieces in headlines today and the Pioneer newspaper sometime in April, May of this year. And it was limited to the conversations of Madam Radia with Raja, and the 2G was the prominent sort of element in it. But I must tell you that some of the transcripts and perhaps even some of the audio tapes have been floating around with a lot of media since that time, and there have been different people associated with trying to push those tapes in the public domain, and nobody was touching it till headlines and Pioneer at least touched that particular element which related to Madam Radia's conversation with Raja pertaining to the 2G scam that all of us know about. So for me, a lot of and then obviously last month Open Magazine came and printed those 9 or 10 conversations, followed by Outlook a day later. And the whole furore sort of kicked up. But in Delhi, in the subterranean conversations that we would have, private conversations that journalists would have each other and other people, the dimensions of the conversations there was much more, people were much more in the know than much before the actual breaking of the story. So for me, the larger culpability of the media lay largely in the silence of Media One, silence of television media more than print media eventually, as it happened. And the reasons for that are complex. There's not one reason for it. In my conversations with various editors, there were 2 or 3 things that emerged on the reasons why they said that they didn't touch the tapes, and television is not touching it even now, except for one small channel called CNET, which touched on it briefly after Open Magazine published the tapes. And the reasons they gave for that was that there wasn't enough criminality so far in the tapes that had come out. Remember, there are 6,000 odd conversations, of which only 140 came out in the public domain, and now 2 days back, Outlook claims to have 800 more conversations, and they're gradually pushing those conversations in the public domain. So we still have about 4,000 conversations or 5,000 conversations which are still floating around, waiting to sort of leak whenever that happens. So the reasons that these editors would give, one, that there's not enough criminality, so how do we do it? There may be a sort of logic to it, I don't deny it. But then if all of us did journalism or limited our journalism only to the fact that if there is criminality, we'll publish it, perhaps a lot of our journalism would not happen. 2, the other argument that they gave, and which was a more personal one, that they have worked with a lot of these editors whose name sort of come up in these tapes, and they feel embarrassed to do it. And if you have worked someone with 15, 20 years, you would sort of tried to avoid that story and not do it, because you couldn't sort of pick and choose the tapes that you wanted to run and gloss over the sort of conversations of your friends. So this was the other private argument that they gave, which is essentially a bogus argument, because it doesn't quite, you have to keep your friendship aside, especially when the tapes are broken and everybody knows about those tapes. So one was this aspect of the continuing television silence. I don't know how long the silence is going to be. If there is criminality coming in future conversations, will they break their silence? We have to see, because the story has hardly played over. It's sort of in the stages of getting played over and get played over many months now. The other sort of, we journalists sort of knew about the incestuous relationship between PR and lobbyists and sort of largely the corporate media and also the other media in the tapes. Though it may have come as a shock to a lot of you, but it didn't come as a shock to us insiders in media that this was happening. And in fact, this whole thing, a lot of the journalists were happy that it came out. A lot of the middle rung, low level journalists who are honest in their approach, who sort of, who go and dig out stories with all their sweat and energy and everything, and they are dismayed at the kind of attitude that these senior editors have displayed. And there is honest sort of anger, and it comes out in a lot of the meetings that we have had since. In fact, the Foundation for Media Professionals, of which I am the executive director, was the first organization to hold a meeting within 5 days of open breaking the story. And we had this whole big debate at India International Center. And the hall was jam-packed and nearly 300 people out there. And there were lots of serious issues raised and questions raised. Subsequently, maybe more than 10 days later, the Editors Guild and the Press Club of India and the Women Press Corps sort of got into the act and had their own sort of subdued meeting. And clearly the spot lines were emerging. One sort of minor sort of journalist camp claiming that there was no criminality and let's wait for criminality. And the other saying that enough had come out in the tapes to sort of start pointing fingers. So this was one aspect of it. I mean, the incestuous relationship is the other aspect. It also sort of brought in a debate about sources. I mean, because that came out as largely the defense of the editors who were exposed. I mean, V. Sangvi and Barkhada. The others largely avoided giving a defense of their actions. Perhaps a little bit Venu and Prabhu Chawla later on in some television programs. And the defense was largely that they were stringing along a source, that they were having a conversation and that they had no intention of, they were sort of lying to their source, inverted commas, so to speak, that they were basically squeezing the source for information. And so that was one big aspect of the defense, and which later on the journalists pointed out that none of that came out in the reportage. I mean, none of the information that the sources were giving them really came out in stories, which was one big accusation thrown at them. And the other was obviously also the culpability of senior editors in sort of either acting as messenger boys for a PR woman with respect to particular political outfits, here the Congress and the DMK ostensibly, and also in sort of now the conversations reveal also in pushing certain statements across that political parties were doing at their behest, and in the case of a few also pushing a certain amount of propaganda in their political columns, which was also that, I mean, V. Sangvi virtually sort of admitted as such that he would sort of write the column that Mia Radia wanted, or which supported the Mukesh Ambani argument in the gas case going on. But let me give you a sort of disclaimer here. That particular side of his argument was indeed what the Supreme Court judgment later came about. So in that sense, we can't argue that what he said, the Supreme Court endorsed that stand finally. So that is a big point there. But largely, even the latest conversations show about how he would go and dress up his columns. Obviously, when he wrote it, he didn't know what stand the Supreme Court was going to take. So that is one. And also, the tone, all of you would have read the transcripts, which is not the same as hearing to the tapes. You see, hearing the tapes is much different. The tone and tenor of the conversation reveal a lot more. I mean, there's a sort of supplicant relationship. There's servile, almost servile sort of conversation in patches. I mean, you could say things like, I mean, the same words can be said in different tones. I mean, if you're saying there are ways to fob off sources, there are ways to talk to sort of PR without sort of having an impolite or a rude conversation. I mean, if the PR person is insisting too much, हाँ देखते हैं बात करेंगे, you know, हाँ देखते हैं बात करेंगे, कल बात करें क्या? The tone and tenor changes. I mean, you notice it, and a lot of that sort of servility and comes out in the tone and tenor, which wouldn't ever come out in a transcript. So for people sort of taking the defense, I always say, you know, it's better for you to hear those conversations before you speak. And the other point I want to make you is silence of TV sources, tone and tenor. There are a lot of, I'm not one of those who say that, for me, I agree with Rajdeep and others that till yet it's a lot of, there has been no criminality, but I think at least it is enough for it to make it to the airwaves and print. I think there is a larger sort of responsibility we owe to our readers and to our audience, which is much less than the standards of criminality, so to speak. One is that point, major point. Then let us also not just thump and say all is wrong with media. It is that same media which over the last 3-4 months has run a whole slew of stories on CWG, on Adarsh, even on 2G. I mean, if it hadn't been for media sort of taking up the coverage on 2G, and there have been journalists like Sunil Jain, Gopi of Pioneer, Shalini Singh of Times of India, for 3 years they have been drumming this 2G story with the same facts and figures. So a lot of credit goes to these journalists for keeping this in the news. And then the CAG report just now, you know, the CAG report just came out now. These journalists have been dreaming it and they have not dropped the ball on the story, so all credit. So I'm not one of them who says all is wrong with media. I mean, the same media is giving you this at the end of it. The other is, I mean, look at the other positive, that there were a whole bunch of editors that Radia didn't dare approach. I mean, she didn't dare approach the N. Ram, the Vinod Mehtas, the Arun Puris, the Bharat Bhushans, the MJ Akbars. There's not one, the Rajdeep Sardesais. I mean, there's a whole bunch of them that she didn't approach. They were just the ones that you hear. For me, that I look at always the positives. I mean, there's the whole sort of peak out there who have a standing reputation. You know, that you can't really have these conversations with these editors. That for me is a big positive from this. The other sort of, I take a positive even from the fact that there has been a big outcry. What if there had been no big outcry? What would that have told us? So the mere presence of an outcry or the mere presence of people shouting shows that they at least know what is right and wrong. So for me that is very healthy. I mean, this, and the very fact actually, I think, I see it as very positive that it has come for the simple nature that all the young journalists have been educated now about what is right and wrong, about how they should conduct themselves with PR women or men or lobbyists. So for me that is a big positive in sort of educating the younger and middle level journalists of some things which they had forgotten from what they have learned earlier. That look, you can be shamed. And for me the other big positive is the way social media took it up. I mean, imagine something like this breaking and all your vents and frustrations not even making it to the social media. I mean, you have Twitter, you have Facebook, and they really took this up. Started playing the tapes all over the place and started linking it to it, debating.